All right, folks, we are back here deep in the second hour. It is 7:37 in the p.m. here at the WLTH studios from the lovely lakeside abode of Gary, Indiana. Yes, it is. That means I got about 22 minutes before Dr. Williams comes in and kicks me out personally with the 2x4. And we don't want that. So let's just get to business, folks. Let's get back to our show, straight out of the cannon with me, Scott Cannon. Here 6 to 8 p.m. Central Standard Time every Friday. Well, folks, while many people were celebrating the election of Zohran Mamdani and other Democrat gains in Tuesday's election, another story broke that flew just a little bit under the radar: the death of former Vice President Dick Cheney. Yeah, I'm torn up about it as well. Now, generally, there is a rule that you shouldn't speak ill of the dead. And generally, I agree with those sentiments, as the dead aren't around to defend themselves from any slander and libel. But I think in this case, we can make an exception. Welcome to history's greatest monsters. Yes. Well, yeah. As I said, Dick Cheney passed away this week, and I think it's important to look back at why our former vice president was one of history's greatest monsters of all time. But first, let's start from the very beginning. Richard Bruce Cheney was born on January 30th, 1941 in Lincoln, Nebraska. His father was a soil conservation agent for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and his mom was actually a softball star in the 1930s. When he was a young boy, his family moved to Casper, Wyoming, which is where he mostly grew up. After high school, he went to Yale University, but dropped out because he couldn't cut it. He later attended the University of Wyoming, where he earned both a Bachelor of Arts and a Master of Arts in Political Science degree. At the age of 21, Cheney was convicted of driving while intoxicated, DWI. He was also arrested again the very next year for DWI once again. And let me just say this before I get, what is it with Republicans and picking these people, these drunks, and these just like low-life degenerates while being the party of family values? I mean, Pete Hegseth's a drunk. George W. Bush was a drunk and a cokehead. It just seems like the Republicans love picking these people who are just weirdo degenerates. And then they come out and they start calling everybody else so immoral. Donald Trump, who's like might be the most degenerative president we've ever, well, I won't say he's the most degenerate president we've ever had, considering 12 of the first 18 literally owned slaves. But I'll just say in modern history, there are very few presidents who are more lewd, crude, rude, and lascivious than Donald Trump. And even Trump himself has said he ain't seeing heaven. He just said that recently. But I digress. When Cheney became eligible for the draft during the Vietnam War, he applied for and received 5 draft deferments. Again, what is it with Republicans and these draft dodgers, while at the same time they're all out warmongers sending everybody else's kids to go die in the war? This is George W. Bush, this is Dick Cheney, and this is Donald Trump. What is up with that? Y'all love war so much, y'all should be the first ones going to sign up to go fight. Right? That would make sense, right? But that's neither here nor there. When he was later asked about his draft deferments, Dick Cheney reportedly said, "I had other priorities in the 60s than military service." Yeah, I'm sure all the people who fought and died and because they were drafted and couldn't get out of it, I'm sure they didn't have any other things that they wanted to worry about, or had. I'm sure they had nothing else better to do, like caring for their families. Cheney would later testify during his confirmation hearings in 1989 that he received deferments to finish a college career that lasted 6 years instead of 4, owing to subpar academic performance and the need to work to pay for his education. So he was just a mediocre student who couldn't finish college in 4 years. So that's why he needed to get deferments from the draft? Again, you don't think all those other millions of men who were drafted, you don't think they had anything else better to do with their lives other than to get blown up in Vietnam somewhere? Or Laos or Cambodia or whatever? In 1966, he again dropped out, but this time from the doctoral program at the University of Wisconsin. And he started to work as a staff aide for Governor Warren Knowles. Again, this is a habit that you see, a pattern that you see on the right of people who fail upwards. People who aren't good enough, who are mediocre, but find ways to fail upwards. He dropped out of 2 different colleges, ends up working as an aide for the governor of Wisconsin. Hey, just saying. In 1968, he was awarded an American Political Science Association Congressional Fellowship and moved to Washington, D.C., again failing upwards, just failing upwards. His political career really began in 1969 as an intern for Congressman William A. Steiger during the Richard Nixon administration. He then joined the staff of Donald Rumsfeld, who was then the director of the Office of Economic Opportunity from 1969 to 1970. He held several positions in the years that followed, including the White House Chief of Staff. In 1978, he'd be elected to Congress, representing Wyoming in the House of Representatives, and was reelected 5 times, serving until 1989. While he was in Congress, he voted against the creation of the U.S. Department of Education, because is our children learning? Is our children learning? Just saying. Citing his concern over budget deficits and expansion of the federal government, and claiming that the department was an encroachment on states' rights. He also voted against funding Head Start, which has been shown to have helped millions of American children achieve academically. He voted against, initially, establishing a national holiday in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. And in 1986, when Ronald Reagan vetoed the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act, a bill that was set to impose economic sanctions on South Africa for its policies of, racist apartheid, Cheney was one of the 83 representatives to vote against overriding Reagan's veto. And also in 1986, along with 145 Republicans and 31 Democrats, he voted against a non-binding congressional resolution calling on the South African government to release Nelson Mandela from prison. He said he opposed the resolution because the ANC was viewed as a terrorist organization. Once again, a reminder that Ronald Reagan, the Republicans, and the U.S. government in this country, for the most part, most of them, supported the apartheid government in South Africa. I'm just saying, remember that. When once again they want to tell you about who the bad guys are, remember Fidel Castro and those people, they supported Nelson Mandela. The U.S. government supported the apartheid government. Just saying. It was from here President George H.W. Bush would nominate Dick Cheney for the office of Secretary of Defense, and he would serve in that office from 1989 to 1993. He also directed the U.S. invasion of Panama and Operation Desert Storm in the Middle East. The operation in Panama actually killed hundreds of innocent people. And so, it's a reminder that just because it doesn't get the level of attention that, say, Iraq and Afghanistan and a lot of America's other boondoggles did, Panama was still a black mark on this country's history when it comes to making sure that innocent people can't live in peace, particularly in Latin America. Between 1987 and 89 in Congress, he was on the board of the Council of Foreign Relations. Now, what is the Council of Foreign Relations? Its members include politicians, secretaries of state, CIA. Once again, the CIA, as always. Anytime there's any place, anything bad going on, you better believe the CIA is going to be behind it somehow. The CIA directors, bankers, also, when anything bad's going on, you can make sure bankers are going to be there. Also lawyers, also corporate directors, CEO, and many prominent media figures. It is the closest thing that we have to a ruling establishment in the United States. So basically, the Council of Foreign Relations promotes the type of endless wars that, you know, we keep finding ourselves in, while we keep having to bomb all these countries, while our bridges and our schools and our roads are falling apart. Now, from 1995 to 2000, he was the chairman and board and chief executive officer at Halliburton, another one of America's endless defense contractors who benefit greatly from us being at war at all times. His record as the CEO was the subject to some dispute among Wall Street analysts. Even their own shareholders pursued a class action lawsuit alleging that Halliburton artificially inflated its stock price during this period. He was actually named in a December 2010 corruption complaint filed by the Nigerian government, here we go again with Nigeria, against Halliburton, which the company settled for $250 million. And in early 2000, while still the CEO of Halliburton, Dick Cheney would start heading the governor of Texas, George W. Bush's vice presidential search committee. And what do you know? Dick Cheney decided and found that the person who was best qualified to be George W. Bush's vice president was him. Yes, it would be him. And at this point, he retired from Halliburton with a retirement package of $20 million. Yes, $20 million.
Money, money, money.
Yes, money, money, money. The early Bush administration, the first few months was pretty uneventful, and then obviously 9/11 happens. Following 9/11, Dick Cheney would help shape the Bush approach to the war on terror, making many statements saying that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, and continued to push false allegations that Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda were connected, even though President Bush received classified daily briefs in September of 2001 saying that the U.S. intelligence community had no evidence linking Saddam Hussein to the September 11th attacks whatsoever. Now, knowing this, he often criticized critics of the war. Those of us who were critical of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan called us opportunists. He called the critics of the wars opportunists when he himself knew that there was no link between Saddam and Al-Qaeda. He also said that they were peddling cynical and pernicious falsehoods to gain political advantage while U.S. soldiers died in Iraq. Yeah, I wonder why they were dying in Iraq, Dick. During the Iraq War, Halliburton, his company, and its subsidiary, KBR, received billions of dollars in no-bid contracts. Yes, once again,
Money, money, money.
money, money, money. Yes, to provide logistical support to the troops. Separate from profiteering, Halliburton's performance came under fire for poor work quality, abandoned products and projects, and unsafe conditions for the troops. These controversies reinforced the image that Dick Cheney was representing corporate and military-industrial complex interest over public accountability. But that's not all. That's not all, folks. Dick Cheney benefited greatly from deferred compensation and stock options from Halliburton. But that's not it. In 2003, when a CIA operative, Valerie Plame, was outed to the press after her husband, Ambassador Joseph Wilson, publicly challenged the Bush administration's weapons of mass destruction claims. Dick Cheney allegedly got his chief of staff, Louis Scooter Libby, to leak information about this CIA operative, Valerie Plame's identity, potentially exposing her to great danger in retaliation, allegedly. Cheney was also one of the main architects of the post-9/11 interrogation program, which included literal torture, waterboarding, stress positions, and sleep deprivations. These methods were widely condemned as torture, violating every international law possible. Now, for Dick Cheney's stance, he remained unapologetic, saying that he would do it all again. He would do it all again to protect the country. He also pushed for and authorized the NSA's warrantless surveillance program, which monitored Americans' communications without court approval. Many civil liberties advocates and members of Congress called it an unconstitutional abuse of power, while the Bush-Cheney administration claimed it was necessary for national security after 9/11. Again, if you have a problem with the way Donald Trump is weaponizing the surveillance state, it starts with Dick Cheney and George W. Bush in 2000 and Barack Obama expanding the Patriot Act when he was president. Remember, you always got to get all of them. Don't just act like Donald Trump came out of nowhere. He did not come from out of nowhere. Dick Cheney is one of the people responsible for somebody like a Donald Trump. Dick Cheney also ran one of the most secretive vice presidencies in U.S. history. He refused to disclose members of his energy task force, which regularly met with oil and gas executives during Bush's terms, arguing that the vice president's office was not part of the executive branch. Really now? So, ultimately, Dick Cheney is one of the main people responsible for this current world that we live in, this current administration that everybody has such a problem with, is a Frankenstein monster, of which Dick Cheney is one of the main fathers. And so I won't say rest in peace. I'll just say good riddance to Dick Cheney.